What did you learn embarrassingly late? When I was in second grade, my hamster died. I wanted to hold a funeral, naturally. Mom insisted on sending him off for an autopsy first. We watched a lot of medical shows, so I was super understanding of why this was necessary. Since the closest facility for hamster autopsies was quite far away, she would send him out and they would bury him for me, since the return shipping would be traumatic to his poor little hamster remains. After about 6 months of waiting for the autopsy report to come in the mail, I insisted she call and check back in. She said they were working on the report. These things just take time. In 10th grade it hit me. Now I'm someone who's very uptight about sex/nudity around my parents. Imagine Hank Hill hearing his mom talk about sex. He'd say bah. It was the late 90s, I was 15, Limp Bizkit was all the rage. To my knowledge my mom had never heard Limp Bizkit. I didn't understand what the song was about. I wasn't prepared for what followed. I asked, "Hey Mom." "Yes." "What does the word nookie mean?" "It means an abundance of mindless repetitive sex." "Oh." And I've never felt more cringe than in that moment. That was the day I learned to always use a dictionary first. That my mom pronounces bagels as beagles on purpose to mess with me. English is her second language, so I just always assumed that she didn't know the right pronunciation. I was in my late 20s before I realized it. I should have known, it's definitely something she would do. Thought an orgasm and an organism were the same thing. Gave an entire speech to my class at 13 years old, first month at a new school, about how I wanted to be a marine biologist and work with marine organisms. Everyone was laughing and I didn't know why. The teacher didn't say anything, just laughed along as well. A girl I'd just made friends with had to fill me in after class. Turns out, they are definitely not the same thing. I still don't know what this means. You swap front and back pairs, and usually one pair swaps left and right. Some tires are actually left only and right only, so all tires rotate through all positions. It helps keep wear closer to even, which helps avoid some wear-related issues. If that didn't clear things up, just find a place that includes tire rotation with their oil change service and go there for your oil changes. Pilot and co-pilot actually has the same hierarchy. I thought that co-pilot is some kind of assistant to the pilot. Edit, I didn't expect this to blow up, but thanks for the insight. I guess to clarify my first statement, I thought that co-pilot will be promoted to be the pilot. The revelation that I experienced was when both of the pilot and co-pilot of my flight address themselves as captain. They both can have the same rank. Where the hell did you get that idea? Most of these I get where the idea comes from when you're a kid and then you just never question it. This. I don't get why you'd think that. Most probably from a brother. They are notorious liars. Especially older ones who tell you shit. Edit, no offense to big brothers everywhere. I had one, I miss him every day. But when we were little there was so many things that fucker made me believe. Geez, I was so dumb. When I was 20, I was presented with a really wonderful promotion. It required me to fly to a nearby state for a week of training. I was super ecstatic about the whole thing. Until I remembered a friend of mine complaining about her struggles with getting a passport. So, I promptly declined the promotion. My superiors were really stumped as to why I turned down the promotion. Me, unfortunately, I don't have a passport. Manager, Boringbury? You've never flown before, have you? Me, no. I have not. Manager, you don't need a passport to fly within the country. And then it hit me, my friend was going to Mexico. I was just going to a neighboring state. Once the realization hit, my superiors all erupted in laughter. The story itself followed me when I went to training. My trainer personally greeted me and asked me if I had any difficulties getting a passport before laughing. At 18. While at uni. After studying human biology at A level. That there isn't just free blood in our bodies. You know, like internal bleeding. I dislocated my shoulder, and cartilage got messed up so it kept falling out. I had some keyhole pics taken to investigate, and when looking at them with the doc. Oh weird, it looks so dry, where is all the blood? The doctor just looked at me like I asked why fire hurt when try hold. In your veins, polite doctor chuckle. I mean, I knew what veins and arteries and yada yada, but for some reason the child thought of I cut my skin, and now some blood is leaking out of my skin sac. Never got the update as I grew up. I for some reason assumed there was just free blood everywhere under the skin. It's hard to explain this one, and I can't Google it to find pictures. Everyone has bought a tube of cream at some point, antiseptic, steroid, eczema, for example. On some of these creams, have you noticed that the lid is circular, but in the center of the lid it has a sharp pointy end? Typically, these tubes of cream have a seal and are used to remove the lid and break the seal by finding anything sharp and pointy nearby, pen maybe. It took my 23 years to realize that the pointy end in the center of the lid has a purpose. That you're supposed to get anesthesia when you get your split chin stitched. When I was in grade school, 4th grade. 8 years old. I propped myself up between two tables and swung my legs back and forth. No idea how it happened, but I ended up falling and splitting my chin open. Apparently school couldn't reach my mom and called my dad. Parents were divorced. Dad was an ob/gyn. He took me to the hospital and put stitches in my chin without giving me anything for the pain. I remember crying and screaming the whole time. He said shit like, "Should I put another stitch here?" And needless to say, I sobbed no. He put it, of course. Afterwards, the nurse gave me 3 lollipops because I was a good girl. I knew I wasn't a good girl because I bawled so much. Somehow I rationalized that dear old dad didn't give me anesthesia because you're not supposed to, when it's an injury on the chin. It wasn't until college, when someone talked about his experience with getting his chin stitched, that I realized that my dad was a fucking asshole. Glass objects should not be put on the stove. Guess how I learned that? Edit, not to be stereotypical or anything, but the gold is super appreciated. Yep, one year at a family get-together, my sister placed a glass container with lasagna on the stove, not thinking about it having been on and not cooling down. It exploded and sounded like a gunshot, leaving a perfectly formed lasagna surrounded by shattered glass in its place. We did not eat it. Edit, since most people were upset we hadn't eaten it, I should let you know, it was only the extra lasagna. There was another one in the oven and we did not actually go without lasagna that day. When I was like 6, our cat went missing, A few days later my mum told me he'd been found by an old lady who was going to take care of him from now on. When I was in my late 20s, Spooky came up in conversation, and my mum out of nowhere said, "Oh, that was the cat taken by that gang." What gang? There was a gang that went through the village taking cats to train fighting dogs with. They got caught, but it was too late for most of the cats. I was outraged. "Mum, you told me Spooky went to live with an old lady." I believed that for years. "Oh, I couldn't remember if we'd told you or not. Sorry." Ellen the Generous. Jerry Falwell called her Ellen DeGenerate after she came out. She was amused instead of offended. He really said that. I haven't heard that since grade school. I remember being a kid and hearing about her coming out on some radio show. The DJ was talking about how she had come out of the closet, exclaiming she was gay. I didn't know the term coming out of the closet, and I knew that Ellen was funny and silly, so I thought she'd actually come out of a closet shouting "I'm gay," and I didn't understand what the big deal was or why on earth that prank was supposed to be funny. You know when the doctor hits your knee to check your reflexes. I honestly thought you were supposed to kick your leg up high. Like you felt it and you kick. It wasn't until I was 23 and moved to another country, and had to do a physical, that the doctor was like, "What are you doing?" I've never thought about this as a woman, but your comment made me think of something, so I'm gonna ask you a really weird question. Sorry for this, but I just have to know. When you pee as a dude, isn't it super inconvenient to do it by only unzipping the zipper? I assume you're still wearing underwear, so do you have to maneuver your willy out of your underwear through the zipper hole? Do you have to unzip the zipper, reach into your pants from above and push down your underwear so you can get your dick through the hole? Do you just reach your hand through the zipper hole to pull your schlong out? How does that work? I'm sorry, I'm just really confused. It seems so inconvenient. Edit. Thank you to all the dudes here telling me your personal peeing preferences. Not sure what I'll do with the information, but I did ask for it. Keep on being healthy. Edit 2, there's 100 plus replies too. This. I know about the underwear hole. The last 3 hours I've gotten a message about the underwear hole approximately every 5 minutes. Thanks for your concern, but I know about the hole. I've become an expert on these issues in the last 8 hours. Sports fan growing up. Am huge into hockey. I'm from South Jersey, so go Flyers. We played the Washington Capitals often enough, and I never knew how they used to do the home-at-home series because they'd have to fly across the country in a day. Also had a cousin from Virginia that liked the Capitals. Couldn't figure out why. Yeah. All those Washington sports teams are from DC. Not the state. When I was little, my dad told me the big cooling towers that are often found beside electricity generating plants were in fact cloud machines, and the Prime Minister of the day had a switch on his desk to turn the big machine on when it got too hot. This made complete sense to me, as they did produce big clouds of white cumulus-like exhaust when operating. Fast forward to when I was around 11 years ago, and the teacher asks if anyone knows why some days are dry and some days it rains, some days have blue sky and some days have clouds. Of course, at the mention of clouds I knew immediately where clouds come from and stuck my hand up to tell everyone about the Prime Minister and the cloud machines. Luckily the teacher picked someone else for the answer, and I was most confused to hear someone go on about evaporation and rainfall and so on. Okay, so great timing. I'm only 16, but I've heard the word dimples are for quite a while, but I never knew what they actually were. Today when I was next to my mate, we were going through my baby pictures and he said how I used to have dimples. I confessed and said I don't actually know what they are and haven't known for years, but I know it's got something to do with someone's cheeks. Want to know what she told me? Nothing. She stared at me, then went back to the pictures. That was the end of that conversation. Up until I was about 15-11 I was convinced that I lived in the USA. Honestly, I'm not really that embarrassed by it. Growing up I was bombarded with US TV, film, movies. I went on holiday to Florida regularly, I spoke English, I didn't know the difference between England and New England, and to top it all off, as a kid coming from the northeast of England I fully thought I lived between Washington, D.C., and New York. I went to York loads as a kid, but it never clicked that I never saw the wall or castle on the TV and there was a distinct lack of skyscrapers. It never clicked until I actually went to New York at about 14, 15, 11, and it took an 8-hour aeroplane ride rather than an hour's drive. I was fucking dumb as a kid, still am TBH. Edit, just asked my mum about this and she says I found out when I was 11 not 15. I suggest the speedy technique that lets you tie your shoelace in less than 4 seconds. I learnt it when I was 15 yo. Comes handy a lot of times, also a great party trick if you wanna impress your friends. Please someone link the video, I don't know how to frown edit this video. The expression "you can't have your cake and eat it too," I'm like, what? Of course you can eat your cake if you have it. WTF are all these people talking about? Took me till my 20s to figure out it was actually meaning you can't both have the cake on the counter and have eaten it. How to make friends. I grew up alone. I had a few friends, but most of the time I was alone. I spent entire summers alone, but out of the house because I wasn't allowed to be in the house. I was the kid no one could be seen with, so no one would talk to me, and what they didn't treat me well. If someone became my friend, it didn't last long. With not being able to see them outside of school and the crap they had to go through to be my friend, people just couldn't handle it and would turn on me to save themselves. I don't blame any of them for it. When I went to uni I was completely messed up. I didn't know how to talk to people or have a conversation. I actually learned from a Reddit post and started practicing on the people I wanted to be friends with. You know what happened? It freaking worked. People started asking me to hang out with them and do things. I learned how to joke around and when to come in with funny comments, learned when to talk and when not to. What I could and couldn't talk about. Turns out I seem to be pretty fun to be around, as I have a solid group of friends now who ask me to hang out and do stuff constantly. This weekend we're all going to a food festival, then out to the cinema to see IT, bouldering and doing the cycling event. Some of us played games over the PS4 last night. It took me until my late 20s to get here though. I just never got to learn this stuff growing up like my peers. I still struggle interacting with girls. They have this specific way they interact and I've never been able to figure it out. It's frustrating, but I have a few female friends now so it's not a big deal, but I would like to understand it. I could go weeks without saying a word to anyone. I remember when I was 16, 17 and I just stopped trying to talk to people one day. Nothing in my life changed. Mum still screamed at me and had her one-sided arguments with me. Kids in school were still huge dicks. The only difference was, me refusing to answer questions in class stopped the class from devolving into them all yelling at me and making stupid noises. No one noticed I had just given up. Dropped the soap. For the longest time I thought it was a reference to the scene in this movie called I Am David, where a character takes the blame for stealing soap, drops it, and then was shot. I thought it meant taking the blame for something, only to be told years later that it was to do prison rape. Oh boy. I was like 15. Also I thought pussy meant weak as a cat, so there was that too. I was 16. Not me but my wife, at 27 years old. A Sugar Ray song came on the radio, and while we were singing along she mentioned that she loved him in Gattaca. I was confused and asked who she was talking about. She was convinced that the lead singer of Sugar Ray, Mark McGrath, was the lead in Gattaca. She was shattered to find out that the lead is in fact Ethan Hawke. To her credit, they do look incredibly alike. Not me but my husband. He didn't know that meat is the animal's muscles. He thought every animal had a body part named meat. He had a bit of an emotional crisis when I told him. He is actually a very intelligent man, but this fact had eluded him as his mother had not wanted to upset him as a child. That Washington, D.C. wasn't in the state of Washington. As a non-American, that is annoying. Also Kansas versus Arkansas. Kansas City is mostly in Missouri. Kansas, named by the English-speaking Americans after the Kansa tribe. Arkansas, named by the French after the Kansa tribe. Kansas City, founded near where the Kansas and Missouri rivers meet, at the western border of Missouri, well before there was a state or territory named Kansas. I was circumcised. I never knew I was circumcised until I went to the pediatrician and my mom told the pediatrician that I was circumcised. Cue story of Patrick Stewart thinking he was circumcised and learning he wasn't. https://www.telegraph.co.uk/news/2017/02/23/ Sir Patrick Stewart thought circumcised doctors gave second/. That snapping your fingers at a waiter was very impolite. Grew up watching movies where people would do it and I thought it was cool. Went to a classmate's birthday party, her parents were rich so ended up in a very nice restaurant. Everything was going well until a girl spilled something and I thought I would be cool and walked over, started wiping everything with my table napkin, which everyone seemed to think was gentlemanly, and then immediately stood up straight and snapped my fingers very loudly and signaled across the room that I needed a new napkin. The birthday girl was not thrilled since her family came all the time and knew nearly everyone that worked there. Nobody explained to me what I had done until much later when we were back at her house. Still makes me cringe when I think about it. I learned how to swallow pills at 26. Always had a problem trying to gulp them down and they just kept swimming around in my mouth. Up until then I always had to mush 'em up and just bear with the bitterness whenever I was sick. Same here. I would chew up any pills until I was in high school, but then my dad made me learn using plain M&Ms and water. He kept saying that pills were designed to be digested slowly, and by crushing it I was basically messing up the dissolving time. To this day I have to psych myself up before I take a pill, it never feels natural. That limes weren't unripe lemons. Fucking what? Also doesn't help that a lot of cultures think they are the same thing. I go to ethnic restaurants and ask for a lemon with my water and often get a lime wedge. That's cool with me though. I love limes. There's a whole issue with what Spanish-speaking countries in the Western Hemisphere call limes. I'm in NYC and was a bartender. Some countries say lemon for both lemon and lime, and some thankfully say lima. Here, https://remezcla.com/culture/lemon versus lime in Spanish/. There are races of Mennonites and Amish people other than white. I grew up in a small city, and was pretty sheltered. Also, here in Canada, there are entire groups of Mennonite people who only speak German. Had a girl in one of my classes who was white but was ESL because this was her first time in school and she was raised in a German-only household. I grew up in a rural area, and there were lots of these types of Mennonites. My two best friends and brother-in-law are also. I never knew any different until I moved to the city and had to try to explain it to friends I met there. Part of the confusion comes from the fact that we always called them Mexicans since they originally came from Germany, migrated to Mexico, and then migrated to Canada. But since many of them had their families in Mexico, they often spoke both Low German and Spanish. I remember driving home with a friend from the city once, and a group of these Mennonites were walking down the street. I warned him to watch out and referred to them as Mexicans, and it blew his mind that our Mexicans were white. I'm 30 and I still undo the belt. Pulling my dick through the zipper seems unpleasant. I'm gonna have to try this new method too. I'm 32 and do the same. No zipper. But I noticed while in the bathroom I'm spending more time than co-workers readjusting my work shirt to make sure it's fully tucked in, while co-workers never seem to have that issue. It always annoyed me that they never seemed to have that problem. It just clicked in my head that they are probably using the zipper. Maybe I should start using the zipper.